Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Hedgehog Business Podcast. Today is a very special episode for a couple of reasons. First reason is because we have Simon Walker, who shares a lot of the customers that he works with our story. So I'm very, very excited to talk to him about that. But also a very, very interesting episode because we have one of my potential co-hosts, depending again on how much he likes to work with me, Patrick Petit. Patrick and I, we had met back when we were working at a startup, technology startup, and well, now we're here. So Simon, thank you so much for being here. Patrick, thank you so much for being here. Simon, how are you doing today?
Yeah, really good, man. Really good. Lovely to talk to you guys up in your winter, a day behind us. Lovely to come in from the future.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, no, thank you for being here. Patrick, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself so that our audience gets to know who this magical being Patrick Petit is?
There's unfortunately no magic. I'm not pulling any rabbits out of any hats anytime soon. But yeah, like Raph said, we met at a startup. I was running product, he was running marketing, and ever since then we've just kind of hit it off. Many hour-long conversations about everything from business to personal life, the choices that we make every single day. And so I'm excited to be here. I've been following a lot of his episodes, listening to them on the podcast or checking them out on YouTube, and this week he was super booked, and Simon was one of the choices for me to come and join, and so it was a no-brainer. Simon, you've had so many interesting companies that you've worked with over the lifespan of your company. Like, was that something that just kind of happened out of the gate, or was that a growth trajectory for you to kind of get to those big names like Lenovo, IBM, Microsoft?
When I write my autobiography, I'll go back and say how it was all a plan. But no, seriously, I think our story is one of very organic growth. I was only 27 when I started the business, and I think I had a lot to learn. I originally came out of financial services. That's where my background is in, in the corporate world. So when I got to running a marketing agency, my initial focus was in the financial services market, which is challenging. It's tough to sell life insurance. It's tough to tell compelling, meaningful stories about life insurance in any way that's not quite sad. So over time we evolved. This is back in 2015, 16, when everyone had a digital marketing agency. That was kind of the done thing back then. And through just organic and natural progress, we got to really thinking about, okay, well, where's our niche going to be? Where are we going to find some clean air to run in here, so we're not just competing with anybody and everybody for $2,000 a month social media management retainers. And I got introduced by complete chance at the time to a guy called Richard Johnson, who I was actually speaking to yesterday. He lives in Hawaii now, who ran a IBM partner in the financial planning analytics kind of discipline in New Zealand. And he introduced me to this concept of marketing development funds, or MDF, which is, what IBM, Lenovo, Microsoft, et cetera, spend on their partners to help them go to market with their products and services. And he basically said to me, listen, I got a huge problem here. Come in and help me manage that and the go to market, and you'll find something that's worth your while. And I sort of went, cool, that's an opportunity that's too good to turn down. Let's do it. And over the next couple of years, we realized that was the niche that was kind of screaming for support and help. And I'd say probably at the end of 2019, we went, okay, we're 100% focused there now. We don't do anything else other than technology, which is IT, across resellers, consultancies, distributors, vendors, and startups and scale-ups that are selling technology into the same customers that those guys are. So that was kind of where we got, how we got really focused. Mm-hmm. It's been an interesting journey. It's definitely been hard to stick to. Like, when you're bank account or your forward sales projections a bit light, and you've got a customer that's from outside your niche sitting there, they're like, yeah, I'd like to work with you. It's really hard to say no to that, right? But what we've learned when we do say yes to, when we have said yes to those, because of course we have, is that often becomes a big distraction, right? It's not our core competency. We don't understand the industry. We have to spend a lot more time getting up to speed on the customer. And therefore, even though it feels like a financially smart decision, it's often a stupid strategic decision to do that. So, that focus has been something that's really important to us.
Right.
When you say organic, Simon, what do you mean by that? One of the conversations that I've had with a lot of our guests is that, a lot of times they were in a particular job or particular industry, and it wasn't for them, it wasn't their passion. So when you say you had that organic kind of shift into that, what do you mean by that?
I think I always wanted to run my own business, like to start with, right? I always wanted to have my own thing. I didn't really, when I was working in corporate, I kind of chafed against the rules and the slowness and the bureaucracy. And I understand why all that's there, right? But I didn't really love the idea of working with it. I think I mentioned in the email I sent you before the show, like my dad got me Richard Branson's book when I was in my early teenage years. And I was like, whoa, this is amazing. This is like what I want to do. This is building businesses. This is chasing dreams, like probably meeting rock stars and having an airline helped. I think two businesses that you wouldn't want to be in are record labels and airlines. Now I know a little more, but okay, it sounded great. To the point that me and my mate said to Dad when we were leaving high school, we were like, we want to start a record label. And this is at the end of 2006, right? So I can't imagine a worse time to start a record label in human history.
Yeah, I'd say so.
But anyway, we didn't know that. We didn't do the sort of, we didn't know what a SWOT analysis was at the time. So we were just kind of riffing on what we thought was cool. And to Dad's credit, we said to him, listen, we need 25 grand to do it. Like, we're going to buy a mixing deck, which we didn't know how to use, microphones, which we didn't know how to use, all the stuff we didn't know how to use. The bill that we worked up was probably 100% light in terms of items that you actually needed anyway. I think in hindsight, we forgot to put an actual recording device in there, but that's okay. Anyway, and he said to us, you guys can do this. I'll invest the capital, but you've got to give up on university. And we were both way too scared to give up on everything that our peers were doing, and we bailed out. But like, that's, I've always had support to be a bit of a risk taker in my family. Dad ran businesses, and then I sort of went through uni and went into the corporate world, and ended up finding myself quite bored, quite constricted by the challenge. I went through like 3 restructures. My job got changed every time. No one ever asked me, hey, is this what you want to do? It was just like, these are where your skills best fit the use that the company needs right now. So go and do this task for us. And so I decided, I kind of checked out, and a colleague of mine said, hey, we should, I was working in sales enablement and sales operations. And a lot of that was involving like digital marketing, early digital marketing at that point. He said, we should do this for our financial advisors who we work with, because they need this. They ask us for it, but we can't execute it for them from our corporate roles. We were just in relationship management roles. So we went, yeah, let's do it. And that's kind of how the business started. And it had a pretty rough business plan. We didn't really know what a budget was. We didn't have any idea what a cash flow statement was. And what I mean by organic, to answer your question, is we kind of learned how to run a business while doing, building a plane while flying it kind of thing. And while the plane was pretty small and pretty low altitude at the start, it still does feel like that. I think you're lying if you say, oh no, I feel pretty comfortable that I have the knowledge for what I'm doing as a business owner, right?
Right.
And so it does definitely feel like that. We're just at a higher altitude with a bigger plane that's going faster.
It's interesting. You made a comment about just kind of doing it, and then where conversations took you, or people that you met, figuring it out as you go. I was recently rewatching the Travis Kalanick story with Uber. I think it's called Super Pumped.
Yeah.
Just brought it out on Netflix, and he talks about just being willing to take the leap and just doing it. He's like, if I don't leap, then I don't know what it looks like. I don't know where to go. I don't have any idea. And so he was very action oriented, and it seems like you've kind of been that way from the beginning of maybe forever for you, was just taking a jump, figuring out what happens. And, if there's no other way, right? You're going to figure out something.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, absolutely. And you've got to figure out how to make money, right? Like that's really it. Like we all talk about, I think people who aren't the shareholder / running the company, or who are working in a corporate, don't tend to understand that business isn't abstract. It's very, very real, right? Yes, you could get into the philosophy of like money as a social construct, but like business is real. You have to make money. You can't do it without that, and you're under immediate pressure as soon as you start to create revenue, and that really changes your dynamic from being in a corporate where you don't know what the balance of the cash account is, and you just kind of assume that everything's going to roll on forwards and tick over okay, and someone else is managing that. And like it started right from the start. So the stupidest thing I did from a cash flow perspective was take 3 months off when I quit my corporate job and spend all my savings traveling around the US and Mexico. I had a great time, but it was probably not the right way to spend my seed capital. And I was sitting on a beach.
You were trying to find clients? Is that why you were over in Mexico?
Oh shit, no! I was just having a good time.
Okay.
I was just having a good time. I was just, I've worked in the corporate. I need a break before I start this business.
Right.
And then I had this my seed capital, and I just was kind of like mid-20s, right? Just woo, let's go. Do I want another margarita? Yeah, I do. Thank you. Let's have that. And so I vividly remember this moment where my friend who was like subletting my house from me in Auckland texted me and was like, "You're coming back in a week, right? Because I've been paying your rent, and you need to start paying your rent again." Now, and I'd lined up a couple of customers, fortunately, before I left Auckland, and for the trip. And I was like, shit, I don't have any money left. Like, I'm running out of money here. I've spent all my money on this trip. So from a beach in Mexico, I kind of rang this customer in Auckland and was like, hey, I'm coming back. Our job that we've agreed starting, our payment terms are 50% upfront on 7 days. And I was like, does anybody do that? I was like, I don't know. I need the money. So they were like, yeah, sweet. Send across the invoice. And that's just it, right? Like that's how I started. It was just learning to figure out how to make money.
You know what I really liked when you were talking about your father telling you, it's like, well, you either do the business or you do college, right? Almost like giving you, like forcing you to dive into one thing or the other, which I think is really great. And I mean, and it speaks to him being a business owner as well. What I'm really interested in is, so you get this first client. What were some of the challenges and maybe some of the failures that you had with when you had that first client and you needed to obviously, do everything that you had agreed with him?
So like we started out doing a lot of like website work to start with for customers. And that, I'd done that before. That wasn't not straightforward. The challenge was converting that into ongoing revenue, right? Like I'd always worked in a very project by project mindset, and I think I still do in a way. And to, so the biggest challenge that we had early on was converting those clients from, hey, you've done a great job for us, we really love the website that we got from you, to actually we're paying you some money every month to do some stuff for us.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me too long to learn how to, well, not too long. It took me a long time to learn how to make sure that that was part of what we do. And I still tend to sell projects to this day, right? I like, because it's where my passion is. My passion's doing cool storytelling jobs, coming up with creative ideas, selling the dream to people, and figuring out how we do it. And so I went, I go, let's do this really cool thing. But we've spent a huge amount of time, what I've learned now is you spend a huge amount of time and cost developing that relationship. And so if you're going to sell them one project and go, and everyone's going to go, that was great. It took me a long time to figure out how we get the process of making sure that there's ongoing work coming out of that customer. Because otherwise you're just wasting your time, right? Otherwise your entire margin on that first deal is taken up by your cost of sales. Mm-hmm. And you're just spinning your wheels and going nowhere. And so that's probably the biggest challenge we had getting off the ground, is just my approach was very project driven, but the projects weren't big enough or long enough. And because I was doing them, I'd sell a project and then go and do it. Right. We were basically a freelancer, really. Mm-hmm. Said we were an agency, but an agency of one. And then, that's really, I think that was our biggest challenge. And I think that is a lot of agencies' biggest challenges, mm-hmm. unless you're doing something like SEO or that's something that's that always on management, and that's where you come from. But because I didn't come from that world, I didn't really know enough about it to be anything other than, like, oh yeah, that's something we should think about in the future.
Makes sense. Patrick, you look like you had a question.
No, I'm just, I resonate with that. I started a software company that was custom software development. And so it's project by project. It was constantly hunting. And it is tough to switch that mentality. So I'm just like, as you're talking, I can just, I've been in that position before. I know how you feel. I get it.
You feel the pain, right? And you feel the pain of, and then it just sets up a whole pile of things that drag your time in as a business owner to manage, right? Like you get a client, you get someone out sick, so you have to defer a milestone on a particular project, and that's all good. But what if that slips an invoice from one billing cycle into the next billing cycle under the terms of the contract, and suddenly you're like scrambling for payroll this month because that's a big project. And so, those are all of the things that I think to use a very overused cliched analogy, when you look at a business owner from the outside, you see the tip of the iceberg, right? You see the visible bit. You see the going out, networking, selling the dream, being the leader. That's really cool. But what you don't see is oh shit, I have this problem that this delivery issue's caused. That's, because you're often on when you're a services business, you're often on such a knife edge from a cash flow perspective, because you're using the money that you're, generating to pay the bills that you have. Mm-hmm. Your time can get dragged very quickly into very critical operational issues, and suddenly you're not focusing on the growth trajectory of the business anymore.
Oh yeah, especially those early days whenever you're just growing. Yeah. There's, the other analogy overused is the trees in the forest, right? You can't see the trees through the forest. You can't see the forest through the trees. It's the same thing. You totally. You just get stuck on these because they have to get done. Something happened and there's no other choice. I feel like Raph and I have been riffing on ideas and going back and forth on what the future looks like for us. Not only, what we're doing today, but just in general. And I've been quite reluctant, not necessarily reluctant, but I had failed recently in a startup. And so I know what it takes, and I know how much energy and effort, and seeing you having stuck to something since 2015 to where we are today, the evolution of strategy and what you thought you were and where you are today are probably could have never envisioned it, right? And so I appreciate the fortitude and the ability to constantly adjust and to be agile in how you approach problem solving, because there's just no other way. And you can't foresee much other than how quick are you to react? And it's like, that's business.
Yeah.
How fast are you to react?
Yeah, and the other phrase that springs to mind for me comes from the original Jackass movie, which is, if you're going to be dumb, you got to be tough.
Yes. You showed me.
I remember the song. That song plays in my head like once a week when I'm looking at a problem, and I'm just like, there's all of these maxims, from like stoicism and entrepreneurs, and people post them on their walls and shit. And I'm just like, if you're going to run a business, the real thing you got to remember is, if you're going to be dumb, you got to be tough. You're going to do some stupid shit, so you've just got to tough it out when you do that.
There's no other. I mean, it's like, I know I'm doing well if the person who I was yesterday or last week looks like an idiot. Like, that's how I feel like I know I'm doing a good job. Is, I always say, like, Patrick last week was an idiot. I can't believe the guy thought that was a good idea. But you had, you mentioned on your website, you had talked before about, like, I think, a career of constantly learning. And so, kind of in vain with where we are today, looking at all the learnings you had to do, and being, from a jackass, having to be tough to get through these growing pains. Like, what are you doing now, maybe from a learning perspective, as your business has evolved to a different plateau and you're flying a little bit higher, your elevation's increased? How have you tweaked what you're learning today from what you learned at the beginning?
So I think the two biggest learnings that I've had, that I have to constantly keep reminding myself of, because they're not one-time things, right? They're like, okay, you have to now execute on this learning every day, is simple is better every time, right? Always look for simplicity, because it's just easier for everybody to get their head around. And then the other one is discipline, right? Like, we know what we have to do as business owners. And because we're big picture, vision oriented people, we're often really bad at spending the time to do the little things that we need to do to make it happen, right? Like, I lead business development. Business development's always been really choppy for us because I've been very heavily involved in delivery. Now I just do it. I don't have my team handle delivery, which is awesome. And they're really great. We have an absolutely kick-ass delivery team. Gives me a lot of confidence selling, but that doesn't mean that I can just keep doing BD the way I used to, which was when I have some time, do some stuff. Now it's got to be a real disciplined, consistent effort around some key targets and metrics. And you can spend a lot of time where the discipline and the simplicity come together is you can spend a lot of time thinking about how you do it and trying to figure out what the best way to do it is. And what should my approach to my content be on LinkedIn? And like, how should I manage this particular thing? And how should I write this? Should I send someone an email, or should I give them a phone call? Like, you can spend a whole pile of time overthinking this, but the reality is simple, consistent.
Mm-hmm.
Like, doing it is what counts. It doesn't matter how you do it. It doesn't matter whether you send someone a text or you send a gift to their office. Mm-hmm. The fact that you did it is generally what matters. And that's where I've really had to teach myself. And as my roles evolved, it's been hard because I've suddenly gone from doing everything to doing one thing. And I've really had to teach myself how to be a focused employee again. Even though I own the business, like, how to be a focused worker within that structure that is doing a cog that the business relies on. And then cutting out time outside of that to think and be focused on other things. And, but like, did I turn up today and do the things that I needed to do for my role to drive forward? And was I disciplined today? And that extends into your personal life as well. I think. Like, you have did I wake up this morning and go to the gym?
Right.
I read Atomic Habits. What's going on my screen there?
So it's so if you do two thumbs up, are you like on your iPhone?
Oh,
or your MacBook or something?
I'm on my MacBook. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so there's like
I don't want that.
Yeah, no, it's so 2 thumbs up is I think fireworks, or 1 thumb up is a thumb, 2 thumbs down
I was
is
just doing
rain.
this.
Yeah, yeah. It
Oh
caught
my
your
god!
thumbs. It caught your thumbs. No. You
God,
were saying some
God damn
fire
it, Tim
shit.
Cook.
Yeah.
even the
Well,
computer, even the computer was engaged. Yeah.
I was like, this AI shit's going too far. But yeah, like, and so I read a book last year called Atomic Habits by James Clear.
Great book.
Most people
Great
have
book.
probably heard of it, right? And it was like the insight that I had reading that book. I read a lot of books last year that were quite important for me, but the insight that I had reading that book was, again, just about doing it and doing it with discipline, right? So, I was like, how am I going to make sure that I'm disciplined and I'm visual about how I do this? Because I know I have I know when I go to the gym in the morning and then I get to work and I do my planning for the day, and then I execute the consistent stuff that I have to execute. And I've brought my lunch to work, so I get a healthy salad rather than having a burger down the road. And then I go home and make dinner and do some social activities rather than getting on the PlayStation, and go to bed at a reasonable time. I know I have a really good day, and I know if I can stack 5 of those together, I have a really good week.
Mm-hmm.
And so how can I be disciplined around how I do that? Because when I was younger growing the business, it was very much like magpie. Do you guys have magpies in the US? You probably do.
I had one recently because there was a New Zealand. So in Hawaii, they have a special like Samoan like culture center, and so a piece of that is a food truck. And so one of the food trucks there made the magpies, and my wife was like so pumped because we got to taste them because she grew up on them. So I've had them. Right. Yes, delicious.
But I'm more like, you got to be careful about when you're an entrepreneur. You always think shiny shit, right? You're always like, new thing.
Yeah.
And you just get so distracted all the time. And the amount of time it takes for you to recover that focus is like, and by the time the other thing that I've realized is by the time I get to August, I'm always burnt out. Not burnt out, but like I'm tired. I'm like ready to roll in for the rest of the year. So if I'm going to do that, I have to really effectively make use of my time between January and July.
Right.
So there are a few things, but it's really just come down to discipline, I think.
Yeah. You sound like, one, you were an athlete and you must have played a bunch of sports growing up, and 2, you're just a very curious person. Those are the 2 things that I'm picking up from you.
I'm very curious, and I wish I was a better athlete. I tried, but I wasn't limited by lack of passion or persistence. I was limited by lack of talent.
Yeah, same here. I've put in a lot of time, but playing football, but it wasn't going to work out for me.
In my mind, was I the perfect person to be the future captain of the New Zealand cricket team? Absolutely.
I love that.
But could I actually do that when it came to executing the skills in a real life situation? No, that's why I play it on the PlayStation. It's easier. It's much easier to just press buttons than it is to do it when someone's bowling a ball at your head or running at you, or you've got a 300-pound person running at you, right?
Yeah. The Mike Tyson quote I think of too. I know this has been a lot of quotes today, but everyone has a plan to get punched in the mouth. It's like, sure, I can see myself doing it, and then you get punched in the face, and then good luck. How are you going to respond?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's not get into cricket. It'll result in a therapy session.
Although I've been a growing fan of cricket lately. So my wife is Pakistani. Her parents are from Pakistan. Cool. So I've been big into watching cricket lately. Whenever they come and visit, or we're spending some time together. I don't know why it took so long for me to get there, but it's a fun sport to watch.
Well, man, Pakistan were in New Zealand recently. So, but a PSA for all of our American listeners: the Cricket World Cup is on in America later this year. It's the greatest thing ever, so you should go and watch it. I think they've got games in Florida, Dallas. I think there's games in New York even.
Yeah.
Just can't miss it.
Yeah.
I think the game between India and Pakistan gets more views than the Super Bowl, actually.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean,
they don't.
India has a great team. Australia, New Zealand. I mean, it's always fun to watch these teams battle. They're good.
That's a good time. It's also 8 hours long during the middle of a workday, so you've got to be a bit careful. But anyway,
Sure. They can last a long time, which is I think kind of fun. That's like I think one of the good parts about it is I can leave it on in the background and I can watch or do whatever I want, and it doesn't necessarily. It's not like watching an American football game where once it's on, it's like you're kind of there for 3 hours. You get some time to watch it.
yeah.
And then the moments they're just fun.
They're fun. I'm going to have to stop myself because otherwise I'm going to hijack Raf's podcast talking about cricket. And that's not what he wants, I don't think.
Right.
No, that's fine. One of the things that I've been kind of noticing as that we're having these conversations with successful entrepreneurs like yourself is that your business almost tends to develop as you do. So like you mentioned, like last year you read these books that helped you give you the skills to take your business to the next level, and then you kind of reach a plateau, and then you kind of look at yourself as like, okay, what do I need to learn now to go to the next level and the next level and the next level? But one of the things that you said that I think that is a really good segue into the next section, which is you said keeping it simple. And a trend, and Patrick and I, we've talked about this before. It's one of the trends with B2B, especially B2B brand building and B2B marketing, is that they try to paint it as in a way that's completely unrelatable. And it's like, complete ecosystem AI that, shaves you and scratch your balls while it does it, right? It's like it's extremely complicated for people to grasp. So how have you been able to take that complexity and then broken it down as a brand in a way that actually resonates with people?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. So, and I think it comes back to one simple concept, which is storytelling, right? And I'll come back to what our thoughts are on storytelling, but I just want to talk about like why I think it's important for B2B marketers to think about this, because I think as B2B marketers, we often get distracted by the product that we're trying to push and the facts about the buyer that we're trying to sell to, right? No one really, B2B doesn't really sell aspirational product. It doesn't sell like why am I spending $1,500 on this iPhone when I could get a perfectly good Android phone for $300? It doesn't sell $1,200 of aspiration margin, right? So we've been everything tends to a very rational, logical. I need to explain the features so you can understand how it fits into your particular problem, right? And I think the biggest challenge with that is that we then start to treat people like they become robots at work, right? They become these like logical decision-making trees, which is absolute bullshit.
Yeah.
Because we have, we kind of, the B2C marketer thinks, okay, I'm going to use a really like clever billboard with some visual storytelling to make someone pull into McDonald's on the way to work and buy hash brown. Right. And it's going to be like, we're not going to be like hash brown, 144 calories, 0 vitamin C, here are the nutritional stats. If you're hungry, you should have one, right? We're going to say like something clever about a hash brown, whatever, that storytelling that's been crafted over time. But then as B2B marketers, we then treat that exact same person who was emotionally influenced to pull into the McDonald's drive-through by a billboard on the way to work as a rational robot when they get to work. And that's not true, right? They're still a person. They still have emotions. They're still feeling more than they are rationalizing about problems, because that's how we got there how we evolved as a species, right? And when I think about like the first piece of simplicity is don't try and think too hard about stats. Like go back and look at how we evolved and how we developed as a species, because the simple answers are there, right? And I've been thinking about this a lot recently because we were in Mexico looking at like indigenous societies and, how the Aztecs and Mayans built amazing civilizations, right? The Maori in New Zealand, Polynesian peoples, how did all of these indigenous people build amazing complex societies without any writing as we know it, or any of the Western things that we assume you have to be civilized? And the answer is storytelling, right? It's the ability to tell compelling stories that enable people to identify with each other outside of their known group. That's the biology, right? I think the known group is about 150, right? So 150 is where you stop being able to maintain one-to-one personal relationships with everybody in the group. And that's what keeps animal groups together, is that they all are able to maintain one-to-one relationships and they really clearly understand the hierarchy. As soon as the reason humans grew beyond 150 is because we figured out this way to connect with stories that enabled us to understand the core purpose and the values and the direction and the strategy of the group without needing to share that in direct relationships with every single person in that group.
Right.
So I know that feels way out of the marketing world, right? But that was only 15, 20,000 years ago that we started to do that as a species. Our brains haven't really evolved very much since then. That's still how we make decisions. That's still how and marketers in the B2C brand space are really damn good at using that to help to sell people a whole pile of shit they don't need.
Yeah.
Right? But we're not very good at it as B2B marketers of telling those same compelling stories to make people feel connected to those brands. Because what I want our customers to be able to do is when that buying group gets to a decision, they don't, and they're arguing about which of the three proposals or vendors to choose. The conversation about their businesses, those guys just feels right.
Mm-hmm.
They feel good. Like, we should use them. That's the business that I just feel like I want to work with. Not the cost benefit analysis is 0.77 and the cost benefit analysis of these guys is 0.76, so we should use those guys. So that's kind of where the simplicity has come into what we do and where we try to differentiate ourselves.
And that makes a lot of sense, because even in the B2B marketing world, there's like an undertone of snobbiness almost, where it's like I'm super rational about my buying decision and my buying journey, but kind of on the being on the wavelength of the Mike Tyson quotes, when he says it's like we're literally we're the same people we were back then, the same people just in funny clothes. And I think that, like you said, right, like when we buy something, we can rationalize why we bought it, but it really is just a feeling first, and then we try to come up with a reason why. But from the brands that you've worked with, how has that reframing played a role in their success overall, you think?
So I think it's an interesting question, because I think the challenge being in New Zealand is we're not in control of the global strategy, right? We don't have we're a 5 million person rock at the bottom of the South Pacific Ocean. We don't have a say in the global strategy. We report, like our corporate tech brands report to Australia, who reports to Singapore, and Singapore either reports to Japan or London or the US. It's like, that's a long way away from the real grunty decision making. And what we often end up with is brands that are taking messages to market here that don't fit the New Zealand way of thinking, that don't fit what the consumer wants. And so we have to be really creative about finding compelling stories to tell within that, right? Like Lenovo is a really interesting example, because they have a really solid green program. They're taking a lot of like carbon out of their supply chain. They're moving towards like home recyclable packaging, which is really interesting. And their New Zealand team is really passionate about that. But in all of their marketing material, that comes through as a footnote of, the computer has a 2.5 gigahertz i7 processor with quad core turbo boost. It's like, sure, cool. So does every other computer. All these computers are commoditized, right? And the other difference with Lenovo is in New Zealand, they're a bit of a challenger brand relative to, in say, the US, where they're a big, a big player in the market. Like HP is number one here and has been for years. So the conversation we had with those guys was, well, okay, we've got to give people a reason to want to think about the brand.
Yeah.
Right? How do we showcase some stories where we walk the talk of who we believe we are to the market, rather than, say, oh yeah, we do have a sustainability piece as part of a wider conversation. We did a piece of work for them where we went out to see their entire distribution network and entire reseller network in New Zealand through a roadshow series, and we did the whole thing carbon neutral and as close to zero waste as possible, which was really hard, right? But it was worth doing because it showcased what they were passionate about, and it meant that people went, okay, this is different. These guys are thinking differently about us. And it's looking for those, and that's a feeling now, right? We're not going to get everybody go, oh, I want to only sell Lenovo computers because they're great. But we're going to get the people who would make a decision based on that emotion to go, I wouldn't talk to anybody else because these guys are walking the walk, and that's what matters to me as a person.
Right.
And so it's finding that little nugget of insight around a feeling or an emotion that you can then use within the structure of the global corporate. Because you can't go and change the banner on the homepage of the main website. That's not an option. So you have to figure out, how can we do this in a sort of sneaky tactical way that's going to get the message to the people who matter.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of the strategy and finding those insights, how do you think your team approaches, from a time allocation standpoint, deriving those insights? Because it's really, a marketing campaign is only as valuable as what little nuggets am I pulling out of it from a strategy perspective. Like the creative side, execution, I think obviously is important to bring the idea to life, but you don't even have a chance unless you can derive a few insights from what they're really saying to you. And I really appreciated how you broke down Lenovo's request. It's like, okay, here's everything that we're doing, and now siphon through what we're saying to derive an insight. And that's a really tough thing to do, because you get caught up in the gigabytes and the processing powers and all those different things. So how do you guys allocate that from a strategy, to a creation to an execution perspective?
So we have a dedicated strategy director who has been with us for this is year 3 now. She's really great. She comes out of a client side background, so she doesn't have that traditional agency must bill model, which gives her a bit of space to work with clients to find these insights. And we've pretty much moved away from selling a campaign out of the gate. We sell a strategy storytelling component first. If we can't figure out what your overall brand story is, we can't figure out how to deploy that on a specific tactical objective, right? Mm-hmm. So we start everything with the space and the time, and that generally it's quite simple. It's quite simple. It's 2 parts. It's discussion and interviews within a structure, right? Because often the business has the answer. They often know what the answer is somewhere in there. They just don't have the skills to think about how to connect it all together and express it. And then the other piece is research, right? So what is the market saying about these businesses? What are other businesses saying? Not because we want to mimic them, but because we want to know what normal is so we can avoid that, right? We, where are the little nuggets of insight that we can find here, right? We might find a Gartner article where 80% of it is about stats, which are boring, and that's not interesting because it's rational. 20% of it is some quotes from technology leaders. And one of them said, here's a feeling that I have about this particular thing. Sometimes we might go as far as talking to the customers of the clients to say, okay, how do you feel about these guys? What was it that made you, where were your, it sounds very, like to a lot of our customer execs who are a bit older and, did business a different way. It sounds a little bit wooey the first time they sort of do it. Like, you're going to ring up our customers and ask them how they feel, what their emotions are, right? But that's really important, because then that gives you some qualitative information that you can use to build an insight from. And from an insight, you can build a story. And from a story, you can deploy that across an entire architecture. Whereas we used to start with a campaign first, and this is like evolution again, right? We used to start with a campaign first. It's really easy to get focused on, okay, well, we'll just sell the product, because that's what the customer wants. Mm-hmm. Customer needs product sales. So we'll go sell the product for them, which never works. So you're,
Yeah.
You know what I really like about your analysis, Simon, is when you were talking about the pyramids and your observations in Mexico, and then kind of correlating that to your observations in your home country. What I think is really interesting is that whatever in any culture that you see, like, stories will follow like a traditional archetypical journey, right?
Yeah.
And what I think is even more fascinating is, number one, how those archetypes are very similar across different cultures, but they're just told in different ways, right? So what it seems to me that you do is that you take those archetypes and then you make them in a way that are going to be accepted by the market in which you're proficient in, right? So what do you think, from your experience, are the best or the main components of building a really good brand story?
Good question. That's the competitive advantage. No, it's not, right? It's starting with the emotion that you're trying to create,
mm-hmm.
and the connection that you're trying to create, and then literally looking at how we frame up a story in a very simple childhood sense, right? We're not doing like Dostoevsky here. We're doing
right.
quick communication to people who are busy. So how do we create, putting them as potentially the hero of their own journey?
Right.
Right. How do we create using the feeling that we know that they have, for a beginning that creates a conflict, right? That we can hang the prospect of a resolution. So, and you don't have to tell the whole story at once. It's not like writing a book, right? But it's being really clear at the center of the architecture what that journey is and what the feelings that you're trying to elicit at each of those stages are, so that when viewed in the whole, the brand architecture and the customer journey results in that customer going on that hero's journey through the story. Right? Because then it's memorable, then it feels good, and then it's something that they can relate and retell, right? Because the power of stories from a biological perspective is that they're easy to retell, right? So when I was there was a really good book I read again last year called Belonging, about some of the lessons we can learn from Polynesian navigators and how we lead teams. To your point, being in Mexico, a lot of those lessons are pretty damn similar to the lessons that the Mayans and the Aztecs and stuff had. Less heads rolling down pyramids, but storytelling architecture very similar. And they would tell these stories that were designed to be memorable, but transfer information from the navigator, from the old navigators to the new navigators to the crew, so that everybody was really clear on what their role was without needing to have an org chart and a job description and a list of responsibilities, right? They could see their character in that story and they knew exactly what they needed to do. And that's what we're trying to do here, right? Trying to create. And I think the next stage for us is starting to think about those different character roles in these stories. So how do you, if you're selling a B2B product, you're not selling to one person, you're selling to 10 people. So how do you make sure that each of those people feels like a character on the journey that team's on, rather than, rather than the person who's being a bystander while the main customer you're targeting is the character. I think that's the next evolution for us, is starting to think that through deeply as, as we start to target more complex buying groups and think more deeply about how that storytelling journey doesn't just stop when the lead gets past to sales, but it stops when that person dies, right? Like, you're still marketing to them while they're after they've bought, you're still marketing to them. After they've quit the job where you sold stuff to them, that story, if you've done it really well, is still working, because they all say, hey, you should talk to these guys because I felt really good when I worked with those guys in the past, right? So you're literally creating long-term bonds rather than short-term, box
transactions.
Really. Yeah.
And you had mentioned your evolution as far as better executing on that side of things. So how do you see and how do you envision the future of marketing and selling in the world that we're living in today? With, there's a lot of changes happening, a lot of uncertainty, which has been a buzzword for quite some time since COVID started. You've got introduction of new technologies like AI that are trying to change the way people approach SEO and can mass produce content and get stuff out the door. I love everything that you're saying from an emotion perspective to drive action. And then talk about the long-term relationships moving forward. What does that future look like for marketing and selling?
Good question. So I think there's a few things here, right? I think AI's real power is eliminating the busy work. At the moment, like, that's probably going to age like milk, and in 10 years' time, we're going to be running everything with AI. But, like, at the moment, AI's real power is in eliminating the busy work and making you more efficient as a marketer, being able to find that research quicker, being able to find those insights faster, being able to do the lifting of generating the 80% between the first 10% of insight and the last 10% of polish for you, as and really speeding up workflow. What I believe the role of the marketer is, and this is something that a lot of people are going to have to get back to, is being the translator between that emotional insight and that workflow, right? How can I become someone who's really connected with my customer, with my buyer, with the stories that matter, so I can not just crank out 20 social posts because that's what the social media plan says, but that I have the insight to make sure that what I feed the tool that I'm using to help me do that is emotional, human, real.
Right.
So that people, because you're right, like, we're going to be able, the biggest risk that I see for the average marketer at the moment is that we're going to be able to create. We're already creating too much content, right?
Yeah.
Like, think about recipes that you read online. I like to cook. I don't want to have to read any more meaningless bullshit about how important this particular recipe is to your family. I just want to know how much butter I need. Right? And there are 100 recipes more for one particular thing on Google, and they've all got an essay in front of it. Right? So if we're not careful, AI is just going to scale the bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
It's going to scale the amount of, the other thing AI does, in my opinion, is that it doesn't create new patterns. It simply leverages old patterns. Right? It's generative. It's trained on what we've created before. It's not able to break yet that pattern. It's a pattern recognition and delivery, not a pattern creation thing, right? And our job as a marketer is to pattern interrupt. Right? The pattern interruption of the 50s was the advertorial in the newspaper, where wonderful copywriters like David Ogilvy were able to use their real knowledge of how people were motivated to present something like a newspaper article and get people to really engage in that content.
Mm-hmm.
No one reads editorials anymore because we know what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Humans have picked up on that. It's just like, I don't know if you've read the book Predictable Revenue, the one about like Salesforce's cold prospecting tools, where they will like send the email that's like, hey, Patrick, I don't know if you're the right person to talk to, but who is? Right? That was really impactful and effective until pretty much everybody being sold to realized that that was a pattern and that was a template. And now everybody, those emails have some of the lowest response rates going. Everybody uses them who's not paying attention, and everybody knows to tune them out. So our job as a marketer is to pattern interrupt, to get that attention, to engage them with the story. And so we have to be really careful about relying too much on AI to do that process. We need to use it once we've figured out how we're going to pattern interrupt and how we're going to tell that story and connect emotionally to do the heavy lifting so we can be even better at that. Right? Because the necessity of that, I think, is going to be even greater as people get to a point where they're content overload. Right.
Yeah, I talking to somebody recently, and they had just mentioned that the creative people who maybe aren't the most organized have potentially a competitive advantage moving forward as we adopt more AI, because all of that 1/5 rule. How do I reduce my time by 1/5 or down to only 1/5 of the effort? It's that same concept that's going to be applied, and so it's enlightening to hear you say that component of breaking the pattern to understand where the insights are and then where you should go with them. That's going to be those creative people, those people that can think, outside of the box, even though that's an in the box statement. That's exactly where I think we're gonna be headed, right? It's like AI will do all the work, will do all the heavy lifting, it will help you organize the thoughts and frequency of whatever's right. But how do you get there?
Yeah.
And that's where the creative people are going to shine.
How do you ask the left field question that leads you to an insight, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you stop following the format because people get trained to follow the format, right? So the response, if you're asking the same questions of everybody that everybody else is, because you went into ChatGPT and went, hey, I'm doing a client marketing strategy workshop, what questions should I ask, right? You get the same answers because people learn how to respond. And right. This is the other thing we're really good at, is recognition, because it drives that fight or flight. Right? Again, simplicity, look for the answer in biology, in our human biology, right? Pattern recognition drives fight or flight. We're really good at identifying patterns and deciding whether they're worth responding to or not.
Right.
Because we get so much stimulus that we have to. Otherwise, we cook our brains. So you have to think about that as a marketer as well, because if you're doing stuff that follows a particular pattern or a template, eventually you'll fail, because you'll run out of runway with the efficiency of the pattern interruption, and it will become pattern recognition, and people will start to filter you based on it not being important to them anymore.
Yeah. You mentioned that thing with Salesforce of leveraging pattern interruption to talk about to drive engagement, not only open of an email, but engagement of an email. Yeah. I was wondering if you also had any information on how long until a disruption becomes a pattern?
I'd love to know the answer to that question. That's a really I think it depends on the scale out of it through society, right? So I think what we've done is we've massively accelerated the speed of interruption to recognition by creating the e-course digital nomad millionaire floating around the world. Not that there's anything wrong with sharing your knowledge and training on the internet, right? But you suddenly have this huge incentive to find the thing that works, and then sell it to as many people as possible, which is cool. But it wasn't the book that the guy, Aaron at Salesforce, wrote that created the pattern. It was the next level of people picking up on that book and turning it into a course and saying, here's my downloadable template set. You can just send this out and modify it, right? And so as soon as that became accessible for, 10x your lead gen for buy this $100 course, right? And then people even stopped it being behind a $100 course and just said, here's the templates available for free on the internet. Then it was like open season. No one thought about it. Everyone just copied the templates, and suddenly every single person whose email address is available on the internet is getting 5 a day of, are you the right person to speak to?
Yeah.
And then, like, the classic, my favorite is the breakup email of all of this, right? Which was a really effective tactic because it was like a really strong pattern interruption. It was like maybe I'm the problem here. Maybe I should pay attention to this guy. But when you've received your 100th fucking breakup email, man,
you're desensitized. It means nothing anymore. I think about
sorry.
I think about all the TikTok video, the dance videos that Raph does. He's a big TikTok dancer. And so
is he?
Huge. And so I think about those pattern interruptions where he catches fire. Next thing you know, he's on top of a trend, and then they just die quickly. So I wonder if that has any role to play in it as well. It's like there's a hot video for like 2 weeks, and then it's dead.
I think it does. And I think the other interesting thing coming back to B2B is we're often, because we make slow decisions, quite slow to pick up on actual like awareness pattern interruption trends. We're not very good at jumping on shit that's really relevant at the moment. We go, like in 3 years' time, because it's finally made its way through marketing approvals, there'll be this huge explosion of brand dance TikToks.
You know it. Raph will be ready.
Like that. He'll be ready, but the market will have moved on. The market will have moved on, right?
That's
and
totally
so I don't know. I think you have this is where the challenge is, because you have to be fast. You're working in a space that's not used to being fast. We're presiding over a little bit of cultural change as well, right? I think the other thing that is important is that we're dealing with a buyer shift, right? We're used to selling to 50-year-old people. And in my mind, I'm still 20, and those 50-year-old people are 30 years older than me, and they're boomers. They're not anymore, right? They're like, if you're 45, you're a millennial.
And that's who we're selling to now. Those are millennials.
That's who we're selling to. Those are the CFOs. Those are they've grown up with this shit.
Mm-hmm.
You're selling to people who were at college when Zuck created the Facebook.
Yeah, they were the first trolls on the internet. Yeah, they were the first trolls on the internet.
They're the decision makers now. So we have to find a way to move faster to meet the market of these people, because where our attention is very different to where the traditional mindset of where the B2B decision makers' attention is. And it's a very, it's challenging me because I don't have any social media presence outside of my LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
Because I resent myself when I use it, because I feel like I'm very distracted. I feel, I don't get a huge amount of value out of it. I don't like my psychographic data being mined for a whole pile of reasons, right? But that's not normal. So as and my biggest challenge at the moment is getting over the hump of, okay, I need to possibly embrace this world to take the next step in what I'm doing.
Right.
Because that's where the attention is.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I find so interesting about social media. It's like the democratization of content creation, where now a lot of companies are not able to stay on top of the trends that these individual creators are changing all the time. So I think that maybe possibly the best solution to that is to create a brand around something that makes you unique, which is what, now with there being so many content creators, right? You have to that's why, again, we started to see a shift in the creation of more vlog videos and things like that, because people are craving more of that, real authenticity in people. But again, to your point, it's the problem is that these companies are very, very slow to adopt what the solopreneurs and the content creators have been doing and are
Yeah.
changing all the time. So by the time a B2B company gets around to doing like my dance videos, right, which I'll say they only go viral when I do them in a thong. But once they get around to getting to that type of content, the content creator, the actual content creator world, which is being mass consumed, is already somewhere else. And so now it's
Yeah.
always like a catch-up play between the companies and the individual creators, which is, again, very, very interesting, which also kind of plays into the role of these companies moving to working more directly with influencers, which is why we see such a huge upsurge in the influencer in the influencer market, because it's a lot easier for you to come up with a new trend and try a new video when you're an individual, as opposed to having to navigate this huge behemoth of a company like an IBM, right?
Yeah.
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 What's your take on that, Simon?
And yeah, absolutely. And just to expand on that, like as an industry, the marketing, the advertising industry is going to have to adapt here as well, right? Because when I'm consuming content on YouTube, I'm not consuming landscape 4K
Right.
high production value video. I'm consuming YouTube shorts that are portrait. They're shot on an iPhone. Like the irony of those shot on iPhone ads now is that like all this content that we make is shot on iPhone.
Yeah.
There was a Foo Fighters gig here the other week, last weekend. I was there. It was cool. And Jack Black is in New Zealand at the moment filming a movie. And he came out and did a song with them, right?
Awesome.
It's a real newsworthy moment. Did they need it to have a news camera there? No, because someone in the crowd filmed it, and they filmed it on a 4K camera in their phone, and the content was immediately good enough to be distributed on the internet.
Yeah.
Right? So like our traditional model when someone asks us for video as an agency, as any agency, is to go, okay, there's a project. We need to book a production company. They're going to need catering. We're going to need to think about how we leverage the spend across all these different content pieces, et cetera, until we've over-egged the entire thing. And it's like, no, actually what we're doing here is creating a 10-second response to a particular trend.
Yeah.
It's not worth getting 10 grand of resource out for a day to do that.
Right.
We're not making it. We're geared up to make ads, not to make individual bits of content. And that's our challenge, I think, is when I think about my customers, they need help. But they don't need the type of help the help they used to need was they needed help creating the ad. The help they need now is is the TV producer role, not the production company role, if that makes sense.
Right.
And that's where we're looking at, like, how do we evolve our services at the moment? It's a real active question with me and my leaders is like, what's the next step here for us with that particular issue?
So on that question, Simon, as we wrap up here, what, obviously we've touched on that a little bit, but what is your view of the future, and what is one thing that you would like everybody listening to our episode here to walk away with?
I think one thing I would like, what is my view of the future? Don't know what my view of the future is. Probably wrong, is the the thing that I think about when I think about the future. But I think the important thing that will continue to be the one thing I'd like everybody to walk away with is storytelling. Tell stories. Find a way to connect in a way that is not written in the product material that you've already got. Develop brands around stories and emotion, not around what you do and rational particular things. Because as a marketer, that's the only way that we're going to be able to survive, or that you're going to be able, that sounds terrible, you're going to be able to survive from a career perspective, is having conviction around storytelling. because otherwise the machines are going to take your job. If you're just taking shit that already exists and repurposing it into something that already exists, a version of something else that already exists, that is 100% automatable.
Mhm.
And it also doesn't work. You're just adding to the content bonfire that we have on the internet. At the Foo Fighters gig that we went to, I was thinking about this, right? I was like, 36,000 people here. Let's say 10% of them are recording this moment right now. That means every second of the show, we're creating an video content. It's like, whoa, okay, that's like, the world does not need more content. The world needs more focused, better content that really makes your market connect and feel.
Yep.
And that's my thinking. That's where as a marketer, you should focus your energy. Because then everything will help you, not hinder you.
100%. Patrick, anything from you?
No, I just, thank you for the time. A lot of great nuggets. There's a lot to think about with this. I just, the last thought that you just said, I'm still trying to process. 10% of the crowd, an hour of video every second. That's just baffling. So I'm still in process mode. But
my brother thinks I'm overestimating with 10% of the crowd, but it's just it's an easy number.
I think you're underestimating anything.
It's an easy number that tells a story, right?
No, I think it's a perfect number. You got to keep it simple, to your point earlier. But yeah, I think it's potentially underestimating, and especially thinking about peak moments, right? Your favorite song's coming out, the most popular song, that number's got to be close to 100%. 80% of the people are recording. And so it's different in different moments. I think it ebbs and flows, but I think overall you're spot on there. It's just, what do you do with that? What does that mean?
So, and if everybody's got a video, it's no longer relevant or interesting. So coming at that from a marketing perspective, how do you cut through that stream of that torrent of content and find a way to connect with people? Because the platforms you're doing this on are incentivized to hold the attention of their audience. So if your content holds their audience's attention, you are going to make serious inroads with your audience, because that platform is going to go, shit, when we served that content that really got those people engaged, they spent 40 seconds longer on the site, and that meant we could serve them 2 more ads, which made us 10 cents more money, which is going to be how we're going to, and that's their economic driver, right? That's how you leverage this, is by content that wins.
Right. But then you think about it too, even
stories that win, yeah.
It's like the concept of the concert. Like here in DC, the thing that makes sense to me, I think of, is like we had our first snow recently. And so everybody who's in DC has to tell you on social media that there's snow outside. Now, to somebody who's not living in DC, maybe they have like a couple people that they follow. It's whatever, right? It's like, it is maybe engaging, but
yeah,
it's the same concept. Is like, same as the concert. Everyone's shooting the exact same video of the Foo Fighters on stage, and you see it 20, 100 times, maybe more, within your own feeds. It's hard to tell unique stories amongst volume. Once you have density of an interaction that engages as many people, it's hard to find that piece that is engaging, because it was only engaging the first maybe 5 times.
Which is why you've got to look real hard and keep on looking, because otherwise you'll just get sucked into doing the same thing as everybody else does.
Mm-hmm.
So it's 50% art, 50% science for a reason. It's a creative profession. I think we lost a lot of that in a pursuit for data-driven, predicting absolutely everything with data, and wouldn't that be nice? But we also have to be aware that often it's the creativity that drives real difference-making work in the marketing world. So
right, yeah. But this was awesome. This was a great one for me to start off with, Rafa.
I think so. I mean, of all the guests that we could have had for you, Patrick, I think Simon was probably the best one.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
I think so.
No pressure for who he was on. No pressure for who he was on next day. It's
no pressure.
Yeah. We gotta keep going. Yeah. We just
Awesome.
maintain or maybe a little bit up. Maintain a little bit up.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can drop a little bit. It's all right.
Just don't get any Australians on. It's...
yeah. Well,
Actually, funny enough, we have an Australian coming up next Wednesday.
All right.
Funny, so I'll send you the episode. Awesome, Simon.
Awesome,
thank
guys.
you so much for your time.
That was a lot of fun, man. That was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed chatting to you guys. I think we covered some really cool stuff, and hopefully people get something out of this.
Yeah,
absolutely. Thank you so much, Simon.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll do it again sometime.
Sounds good. Chat to you guys soon.
Bye, everybody.
Cheers.
See ya.
Bye.